Hey y'all, how you doing? Welcome back to another reading session of A Serial Killer's Daughter by Kerri Rawson. So we're headed into part 5, and it says, Seek refuge. Whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. That's from Psalms 91, verses 1 and 2. All right, chapter 26. Respite can be found thousands of feet in the air. Monday, February 28th, 2005. In the early morning of the fourth day, Darian carried my bag down our apartment stairs, opened the door to our cold, dreary garage, and quietly placed it in the trunk of the car. What happened to our Power Cat tag? I removed it. The KSU frame on the back tag too. I didn't want it to give us away. Oh, you ready? I checked outside a bit ago. I think we're in the clear. Ready, I guess. Once we get you home, you will feel better a bit. Yeah, okay, let's go. I held my breath as Darian slowly backed the car out of the garage and turned up the small, steep hill to the parking lot in front of our building. Clear. No news trucks waiting for us. We both let out an audible sigh of relief. See, we're okay. As he turned out on the main road, I kept looking behind me, checking to see if anyone was tailing us. We're okay, no one back there. Darian turned and looked at me with a slight smile and a shrug, trying, trying to cheer me up. I reached over and patted his leg. Okay, we're going to be okay. Maybe if we said it enough to each other, we would eventually believe it. I stared out the passenger window as we drove south on I-275 to the airport. The earth was frozen and bleak, but at least I was out under the sky and not stuck in the tiny apartment where we had ridden out the past few days. And we had a plan. We were doing something. Anything. Finally. Darian rolled my bag into the airport and waited with me while I checked in, going over last-minute instructions. I know you flew 2 months ago, but this is your first trip on your own, and he hugged me tight at TSA. Love you. Love you. He waited till I got through security, and then with a wave, he turned and left. I was on my own, surrounded by hundreds of folks scurrying up and down the concourse, all of them unaware the daughter of a serial killer was among them. Not long after sitting down at my gate, sipping a hazelnut latte, I heard a familiar voice. I looked up to the massive TV hanging down above my head to see a family friend from my parents' church giving an interview on CNN. He was standing in as the church's spokesman. There was a ticker running fast at the bottom. BTK, Wichita, Dennis Rader. My God, is this what it's been like for the past 3 days? Church president, guy next door, father. I looked back up and stared with my mouth open at a photo of my dad from Sunday. He was in a neon orange jumpsuit, tired, sullen, angry, disheveled, scowling. He's going to be peeved about that ugly mugshot. I looked around the concourse. My dad was on every TV screen. My hands started twitching. Dear God, I'm not going to survive this. My face blazing bright red, I scrunched up small in my hard plastic chair, hanging my head in shame. What if someone knows who I am, who I belong to? And then I heard this voice, Dad. A video of him speaking cop, curt and official, in his dark brown winter compliance officer coat and ball cap. My hands were now violently shaking. It was a clip from an interview he gave 4 years ago for a local Wichita TV station, KSN. The dogs are somewhat territorial as well as vicious, and we've been trying to round them up and corral them as best we can. Like John Wayne, his boyhood hero. Sounds like he did when he called in the murder of a young woman in '77. You will find a homicide. Nancy Fox. That is correct. Nancy was 25 years old. I'm 26 years old. Come, Lord Jesus, come. God is my rock. Bits of Psalms were running in my head again. I scrounged around in my carry-on, grabbed my black MP3 player and headphones. Blasting a Rush of Blood to the Head by Coldplay was in my ears, and I ducked behind my thick book, Harry Potter and the Goblets of Fire, a favorite to escape in, survival, in whom I take refuge. I don't remember getting on the plane, but I do remember scrunching up against the cold oval window and an off-duty attendant sitting a seat away from me, leaving a heaven-sent gap between us. I do remember taking off, feeling freedom with the sweet whoosh of the plane lifting and tears rolling down my face as we rose above the murky clouds, finding rare bright blue sky as we turned toward Chicago. BTK's daughter was going home. Sharp, warm white beams bounced off the windows, warming my face. The Lord is my light. I don't know what's waiting for me at home. More CNN? Dad, Michigan is far away from whatever is coming and my salvation. But Mom needs me and I need her. I don't know if I can do this, if I'm strong enough. I'm not. Whom shall I fear? God? Can I stay up here forever? As peace rushed by outside and tears splotched the dog-eared pages of my book, I twisted a soggy white tissue around my fingers. A gentle voice interrupted my grief. Would you like some chocolate? I picked it up over in Japan. The attendant had a kind face to match the voice and handed me a chocolate bar. Thanks. Sure. You okay? I don't know how to answer that. Dad is... I'm going home 'cause... Okay, going home for a family emergency. That works. Sorry. I hope everything works out. Works out. Works out. Yeah, not this time. I turned my back more to him and leaned as close as I could into the window, putting Worlds Apart by Jars of Clay on repeat in my ears. Let's never land. It was a quick 40 minutes to Chicago, and soon I was wandering O'Hare's unending concourses for lunch in my next gate. I remember grabbing orange chicken and noodles from Panda Express and texting Darian. Got through my first flight, have a pounding headache. I don't remember boarding the second plane or the flight. Maybe I slept. 4 p.m., Kansas City. My stomach was in knots as I walked down the jet bridge in Kansas City late in the afternoon. I don't know what comes next. Mom! She was in her cheerful navy blue raincoat with the yellow liner, but her shoulders were hunched and a pallor hung over her face. She was standing right on the other side of the security divider at my gate with Uncle Urban and Aunt Donna. Family, Kansas. I rushed into my mom's arms. Tears flowed down our faces, both mirror images of exhaustion and devastation. After I hugged my aunt and uncle, I walked arm linked in arm with Mom as we went to the carousel to get my bag. I saw your father Friday morning. He stopped by um, snacks for a cinnamon roll, gave me a kiss, told me he'd see me at lunch. I talked to him the night before. He reminded me to check the oil in the car. Mom and I were debriefing each other, sitting in the back seat while headed westward. I'd forgotten my phone charger in the frenzied packing, so we made a side trip to Circuit City. My uncle helped me pick the charger I needed and paid for it. Granddad Palmer and Grandma Eileen were waiting for us that evening at my aunt and uncle's home, and Adie and Jason joined us for dinner. We had Kentucky Fried Chicken with mashed potatoes and gravy, and nothing had ever tasted better. I sat next to my mom as conversation flooded in and out. "It's like your dad has died," Mom said. All of a sudden, it was your dad, your father, like he now belonged to me and not so much her. Then, with steeled eyes and determination, Mom said to all of us, "We've been through worse. We'll get through this." Worse? Referred to losing Michelle. I talked to Angie that night on the phone, sobbing, rocking my body on the floor in the dining room. "I can't stop shaking. I feel like I've been hit by a 10-ton truck." "You're in shock," she said. "It's completely understandable. You're under a great weight of trauma still happening, ongoing." Oh, shock. I've been physically and mentally in shock to some degree for 4 days. It took years for me to realize how badly I messed myself up those first days. I should have gotten help, gone to the hospital, had someone knock me out. I will regret it for the rest of my life. Later that night, my aunt was checking her answering machine, and I heard that voice again. "Hello? Anyone there? Can you pick up?" "Dad." I froze inside, but outside, I lost control of the shaking. "Your dad is BTK." We listened to the message, but we didn't call him back. At bedtime, I curled up next to my mom in her bed, just like when I was a little girl seeking solace. We cried together for some time, and I kept saying, "I'm so sorry, Mom, I'm so sorry." A little later, I went downstairs to sleep in the bed my uncle had set up for me. Maybe I shouldn't have left her, but I couldn't take any more. Not tonight. Chapter 27. There is safety in numbers. Tuesday, March 1st, 2005, Kansas. The shaking finally stopped on the 5th day. I woke up early Tuesday morning on a mattress in my aunt and uncle's living room. Pale morning light was deepening in color. The house was still, and my body was at peace. I sat up and held my hands out in front of me, waiting for the shaking to return. They were still. Maybe, just maybe, I will survive this. Soon other folks were rising quietly. The smell of Folgers wafted from the kitchen, cereal bowls rattled, and newspapers rustled, pencils at the ready to fill in a day's crossword. This was a home where I could stay barefoot in my pajamas for any length of time I desired. I could stretch out on the oversized leather couch, hide in Hogwarts for hours, and not be plied with questions I wasn't ready to contemplate answers to yet. This was a quiet place with gentle, kind voices that belonged to people with lives that would continue on as they had for the decades before my dad knocked a massive hole into all of it. This was a God sent respite, and I never wanted to leave. Your Uncle Paul was granted emergency leave from Iraq and is coming home, Mom told me. Dad's second oldest brother had been called up to active duty from the reserves a few months before. I was glad he was coming home from the sand, but not why. "Uncle Jeff was in the newspaper yesterday," Grandma Eileen said, handing me the front section of yesterday's Eagle, pointing to a story at the bottom of the page. On Sunday afternoon, my dad's youngest brother, fed up with reporters driving by Grandma Dorothy's home, stepped out on her porch to talk to two journalists from the Eagle. He told them Grandma was 79 years old and frail, that he had to unplug the answering machine because folks were leaving harassing messages. "My mother still can't believe it," he said. "She's still very much in denial, and so am I. But maybe with me, acceptance is starting to creep in. I don't think my brother is BTK, but if that is the truth, then let the truth be the truth. Let the truth be the truth. That's what Grandpa Bill would say if he were here to guide us, but his heart would be shattered. Grandpa, send aid to us all. My uncle went on to tell the journalists that errors and false speculation were flying around. No one turned in my dad. Grandma is loving. Grandpa was tough but decent. Grandpa had served as a Marine and was a God-fearing man, strict but not unreasonable. There was no trouble in the family, no abuse. The FBI had asked him if he or any of the boys had been sexually abused by my grandparents. Dear Jesus. My uncle said, I told them no, and that's the truth. That's the truth. I read the article slowly, brushing my thumb over the newsprint, letting my tears fall where they would. Grandma Eileen handed me a couple of tissues and patted me on the arm. Your Uncle Jeff did a good, brave thing. Yes, he did. My grandparents never, didn't. No, they are very good people. Strangers are making up stories. My shoulders tightened, my jaw clenched, and anger flashed across my face. This is all Dad's doing. His fault. Your father loved and cared a lot for your grandparents, his brothers, all his family, your mother, you, Brian. Yeah, well, we all loved my dad very much too. Love, however much there was, hadn't been enough to stop him, to help him, and now he had left all of us to pick up the pieces. I stood up, my shoulders slumping, and went to the patio door. The grass was brown, but the sky was bright, Kansas blue, laced with wispy clouds. My eyes stung with tears again. Had someone abused my father when he was a boy? The thought seared right through me. Who? When? I racked my brain and couldn't come up with any answers, nothing but empty despair, confusion. Then a flash of conviction, of knowing. Many people abused as children don't grow up to harm a soul. No matter what had happened to my father, it wasn't an excuse. There were no excuses for what my father had done. He was responsible for all of it. He chose this for himself, chose to harm others. Why? Why those 10 innocent children? The headline on today's paper said yesterday Dad had been charged in court with 10 first-degree murders. I was flying while he faced one of the worst days of his life, alone. I wasn't able to be with him. I wasn't sure if I'd ever be able to be with him again. Tuesday afternoon. He's confessing. Mom was scribbling in shorthand on a yellow legal pad, her pen alternating between flying and pausing in midair. She wrote, he's confessing, underlining it twice and tapping at it to get my attention. Yeah, Mom. He's been confessing for days. Let the truth be the truth. Pastor Mike, who shepherded my folks' congregation, had called Mom after visiting my dad in jail. He was doing his best to try to relay a message to us from Dad, who had been trying to grasp at what was wrong with him. Mom was sitting on my aunt and uncle's bed, their homemade wedding quilt folded neatly at the foot. I was sitting cross-legged next to her, searching her face for signs of too much distress. She wrote, "Has something wrong with him," underlined, tapped again. "Yeah, Mom, he definitely, totally, has a whole heck of a lot wrong with him." Mom wrote, "Monster, hidden, dark side, black hat." But Dad wasn't the black hat. He'd been the white hat, the good guy, the guy who saved the day, the hero, my hero. Dad had grown up on cowboy lore, Gene Autry, Roy Rogers, and the Lone Ranger. His love of the West had captured my childhood imagination. I'd watch him add oil and popcorn kernels to our red popper and wait for the pop, pop, pop while he poured us each a Pepsi over ice. Then, after salt and butter was added to the crunchy white corn, we'd be on to John Wayne taking on the bad guys on a Saturday night. I wasn't keen on being a damsel in distress. I wanted to be a cowgirl, wear jeans, ride horses, rustle up cattle, and pack a six-shooter. Cowgirls could rescue themselves. Mom would shoo my brother and me outside if we got too wild playing cowboys and Indians in her house. War cries, toy guns, and couches turned into forts led to exile till the supper bell rang. Mom nudged me, holding the legal pad so I could read. Sexual, can't control, bondage. I winced at the words, my face blazing hot. I looked away. We don't talk about religion, sex, or politics. Mom's voice rose. It was direct but strained. No, he never sexually abused me or the kids. He never hit us. The police asked the first day. He never hit, but he still could be abusive physically. Brian. He tried to strangle Brian twice. The second time was a few years after the first. Dad pushed Brian up against the kitchen closet, putting his hands around my brother's neck like before. Dad told Brian, "My loyalty belongs to your mother. It's time for you to move out of my home." Mom pushed Dad off Brian, who was pale as a sheet. She stood up to Dad. She was brave, all 5'7" of her. Another time, Dad chased me down the hall when I was 16, threatening me within an inch of my life. I'd cussed at him in our living room, my eyes blazing fire. His face turned red with murderous rage, the angriest I'd ever seen him. Mom stepped in, blocking him with her body, bought me a few seconds, kept me safe. He kicked a dent in my door, but I had it locked by then. I was safe. Dark side, black hat, monster. The Lord is the stronghold of my life. I have to pause here. Okay, so Kerri was 26. Her older brother Brian was 30 at the time of BTK's arrest. She can recall twice when BTK choked Brian. So we figured Brian might have left home when he was 21, 22 or something like that. And I don't know. It's like, forget about BTK, all right? We're just talking about a family situation. You know, shit happens. Conflicts arise. We don't always handle situations the right way. We don't always contain our anger, nor containing your anger is a good thing. But I'm just saying sometimes things get out of hand. I'm not making an excuse. Like I said, let's just remove BTK out of the equation for this moment. Um, and then you got Kerri, who cursed at him when she was 16, and he ran after her. I don't call this physical abuse. I just call it isolated situations where things just got out of hand. I mean, out of all the years that they grew up and lived with their father their whole lives until they left, I mean, you call that physical abuse because you cursed at him and he chased you? Well, if that's the case, maybe my mother should have been thrown in jail when I was 5 years old and I was trying to call Michael Jackson. And the operator tricked me in giving her my phone number so she can call back and tell my mother I have been trying to call Michael Jackson on the phone. My mother whooped the shit out of my behind with a belt. Literally. My behind with a belt. That very same year, I got another serious ass whooping. Red hot, literal ass whooping. Because I was playing with fire in the kitchen. She lit my ass on fire with a belt. I don't call this abusive. I mean, is it just me? You who are listening have, you know, has there been a argument, a conflict that arose in your household, whether you're married life with your own children or growing up with your siblings and your parents? I mean, did you ever say something smart to your mother as a teenager and she slapped the shit out of you? Would you call that physical abuse? That one time situation? Or maybe your mother slapped you twice during the course of your whole life. Would you call that physical abuse? I don't know. Let me know in the comment section. Or maybe, due to my culture, you know, what's not physically abusive to us, in another culture it is. Maybe that's it. I know it's right of you to ask, checking on us. Mom's tone softened. Her face was falling, turning pale. This was too much, too soon for her. The man we knew, the man we didn't, the man we thought we knew, the man who never really existed. Of whom shall I be afraid? The pen dropped, the legal pad now lying discarded by her side. She ended the call soon after. The police seemed to think we were all abused. They asked, now the pastor is. I'm not sure they think it. They're just making sure we're okay in these situations. Often, Mom stopped me. I took care of you and your brother, changed your diapers, gave you baths. I would have seen if he caused any harm to either of you when you were little. Ah, heck. People assume dad sexually abused us. Your dad is BTK. You're BTK's daughter. He must. Mom looked down at her notes and said, Your father is confessing, says. I listened as she repeated the conversation from the phone. As she spoke, color slowly came back to her cheeks, and her eyes flashed with a spark I hadn't seen since I'd come home. Anger, I reckoned. She repeated the conversation with the pastor to my aunt and my grandma, each time growing stronger, gaining a bit more of herself. She knew the truth now, heard it directly. She was facing it, and it would eventually set her free. Thursday, we fell into an easy, quiet routine at my aunt's, whom we coaxed to return to her teaching job because we were strong enough to take care of each other during the day. Mom and I were eating and sleeping, taking the first hard steps on our way to recovery. We left the TV off, only turning it on to watch The Amazing Race or Survivor in the evenings. The only incoming news was from the day's newspaper, which each of us would choose to read on our own. It was a safe place, far removed from the madness in Wichita and the camera stalkers in Detroit. Early in the week, more news trucks were parked outside our apartment, and one followed Darian, who kept swinging Michigan lefts to shake it. Reporters showed up at his office, and his coworkers would answer the door for him. Reporters were calling him at his job and on his cell, too. I'm so and so, and I would really like to speak with your wife. Do you know how we can contact her? Do you know where she is? Grandma had taken me to the bookstore buying Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix for me because I wanted to keep going in the story. At the checkout lane, we nudged each other, seeing my dad's mugshot on front of several magazines and national newspapers, blaring BTK headlines. Don't tell your mother. No, I won't. My grandparents were a steady, constant presence, a reminder my roots ran deep and strong. Granddad spent his days reading or working crosswords from a corner recliner. He would lift his head occasionally and give me a small smile or ask, "What does the paper say today about your dad?" I'd move next to his chair and tell him while he listened and shook his head, his eyes pained. Grandma flitted around the house, seeing to the dishes, taking care of everyone, making sure we were well fed. Mom and I often sat at the kitchen table, drifting in and out of conversation. I said, "Do you remember on my birthday 5 years ago, Dad waking up after his stomach scope and freaking out? He was acting nervous, saying, 'Did I say anything crazy while I was out of it?' Mom asked, 'Was that the day we had a tornado warning when we got home?' 'Yeah, that was a rough day. Not birthday like.' I remember wishing I thought to bring cupcakes we had picked up at the store with me to the hallway. Do you think your dad was worried he was going to say something in the operating room?" I shrugged. Who knows? Mom said, "Did you know I was teasing him this fall that he spelled like that guy, BTK?" I grinned a bit at this, trying to stifle a laugh as I checked Mom's face. She was trying to hide a smirk too. When our eyes met, we both started giggling. It felt good to laugh. People died. I'm not supposed to be laughing ever again. I asked your dad once, why would BTK use a cereal box to communicate with the police, like it was reported in the news? He said cereal, like a serial killer. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry at that one. Where did he get those boxes? We don't eat that type of cereal. And that's what my poor mom was wondering. Mom continued, when I got interviewed, they asked what was behind our hidden door. I asked, what door? They said the one in the kitchen behind the table. I said, you mean the door the dryer is behind? I snorted, tried to contain it, and gave up laughing out loud. Mom and Grandma followed. The police asked me about safety deposit boxes. I don't know why. Later, we learned that Dad used secret ones to store BTK items. Wow, I wouldn't be mad at them laughing. I mean, they're not laughing, certainly, at the murders. Huh. But, laughter is medicine for the soul. And sometimes you got to laugh to keep from crying, and laughing can be a, a defense mechanism, you know? Mom's face turned serious, her voice lower. Early last year, there was a special about the 30th anniversary of the first murders. What happened to the Oteros? It was on TV. Your dad watched it. Oh, I didn't know he had watched it. The paper ran a large piece about the murders around then, too. I leaned over onto the table, laying my head on it, crossing my body with my arms. The first 2004 BTK communication showed up in March on the 27th anniversary of Shirley Vian Relford's death. What I was learning about my dad's murders kept cutting in and out of my head, but I wouldn't say these things out loud, trying to protect my mom from the worst. I don't understand why strangers are saying that we knew what your father was doing. We were somehow involved, or we must have known. Her face was stretched and pained. She needs rest, her own books and stories to escape in. As far as I could remember, she had dozens of books with pretty covers depicting heroines full of hope stacked against the wall next to her bed. They were quite the contrast to Dad's dark-colored true crime books propped up above his head on his half of the headboard. Mom, there's no way you would have stayed in that house with him, raised us kids with him. If we had the slightest inkling, we would have gone screaming out the front door and run straight to the police department. Grandma said, your dad worked down the hall from a police department of 14 years. They didn't know either. No one knew but Dad. Wow. He worked down the hall from the police department for 14 years. Saturday. My uncle and AD drove to our home Saturday, picking up clothes, books, and other things my mom needed. The thought of my house made my stomach tighten. It was the only home I'd ever known, and now I wasn't sure that I was even brave enough to ever set foot in it again. Mom already determined she would never sleep there again. Not one of us blamed her. But now she was planning on staying with her sisters and my grandparents, moving every few weeks till we could figure out what to do about the house and find her a new place to live. Dad had cost us our home, 34 years, gone like that. I was anxious while my uncle and cousin were gone, worried about what they would encounter. But when they returned Saturday evening, they reported it had been ransacked, which we'd been afraid of. It didn't even look as if someone had been there, let alone a team of investigators, crime scene techs, and who knows who else. Mom's lunch plate that was left on the kitchen table when she was rushed out of the house was even sitting in the sink. Someone had rinsed it for her. My family talked me into looking at return flights to Michigan. You need to get back to Darien, to teaching, my aunt said. It will help. The kids will. Having a routine. I was worried about my mom, didn't want to leave her, but she said, I'll be all right. I've got lots of help here, and you should go on home. Home? This was home. Kansas, not Michigan. I wanted to stay another week in the quiet, peaceful place where I was safe, and I didn't want to think about facing the coming months while I was 16 hours away. Darian said it was getting quieter. The news trucks were gone, so we booked a flight for me on Sunday. I missed him, needed him. I had to go back sometime. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? All right, so that concludes the reading of chapter 26 and 27. I'll be back to read again sometime tomorrow. Thank you. And by the way, in case you don't know, on my other channel, Madam Whipbass Reads, I had begun reading Inside the Mind of BTK by John Douglas. I think I started like more than a year ago, and I never finished it. So I picked back up from chapter 15. But if you like to read or listen from the beginning, there's an introduction video, and then it starts with chapter 1 and 2. I read 2 chapters at a time because in that book, the chapters are super long. So you could start from the beginning, or you can start from where I left off at chapter 15. And in fact, I will put the link to the introduction and chapters 1 and 2 in the description box of this very video here, so you can get over there much quicker. All right. Thank you again for tuning in, and you'll hear from me soon. Bye now.